Alright, so this third video for the solar trailer, I figured I'd start off showing what I do quite a lot at work, which is drawing sheet metal parts in Solidworks. I'm a shop manager at a local laser shop here. We do laser cutting, water jetting, plasma cutting, and sheet metal forming mainly, but we also handle many other processes. Today's video will be going over the design of the mounting system, and I've mentioned mounting it to the Unistrut, and that's how I'm going to do it. This CAD file is just a representation of the equipment. They don't have unnecessary details like the screens and such. They just have the mounting system and the exterior profiles. This main panel is made of 12 gauge 304 stainless steel, and that's going to be quite heavy at 56 pounds, but I wanted to make sure it can hold up that heavy battery without issues. Because of the extreme weight on this thing, I also decided not to hang the weight off that front wall, just relying on the shear strength of the bolts to keep it up. So I decided I'm going to run this plate all the way to the floor, and the weight will rest on the floor on this bottom flange here, and then the bolts just keep everything against the wall. You can also see the 6 slotted holes that mount to the Unistrut. Starting at the left is this Energitech battery. It hangs off some bent flanges, like I showed earlier. It's kind of hard to see in there, but there's 4 bent flanges that's going to hold this thing up. It's also held in place by this top bracket, which will keep it from sliding side to side or bouncing up and out. The bracket's going to be bolted in with 4 nutserts, which is like a fancy rivet and nut all in one. If you haven't seen one, you got to check them out. They're very cool and very handy. Then the battery cables will come out the bottom. The positive will go directly to this Class T fuse holder and then make its turn to go right up into the bottom of the day inverter. The inverter will also be mounted to the panel with those nutserts, making this a fairly easy install. In between the battery and inverter are going to be the 12-volt converter, some self-resetting circuit breakers, one for the 48-volt input, one for the 12-volt output. The converter is just going to be your average 30 amp 48 to 13.8 volt DC to DC converter. Its primary job will just be to run the lights and the tongue jack. Then on the far right is the breaker box, pretty straightforward. Above that is going to be your 2 duplex outlets that I'm planning on putting in. I've ordered some with some USB-A, USB-C for charging phones and such. Anyways, it's very basic design, but it should do the job pretty well and looks very unique. So next we're going to get to actually making this panel and getting it ready for all the equipment. Alright, so I have the panel made here, and I've already put the breaker box and one of the outlets in. I gotta do the other one and run the wiring for it. I still need to put the 48 volt to 12 volt converter in. I got to do both of the circuit breakers for the 48 side and the 12 volt side. I got to mount the Class T fuse. I still need to put in the nutserts for the top battery holder to keep it from moving around. I got to do the nutserts for the day inverter to mount it. After all that, we should be able to mount it against the wall with the Unistrut, and then we can start the DC wiring. We can run some of the AC wiring through the Liquid-Tight and maybe get the PV from up in this top corner, you can't see it out of the shot, down to it and somehow ran into the inverter cleanly enough. I haven't figured that part out yet, so we're going to do that together. Here we go.
Alright, we got a lot of work done today. We got the inverter and the battery mounted on the wall, which was a big step. The battery was especially heavy. I would not recommend moving that very often. Thankfully, now that it's on the wall, it is staying on the wall. Fingers crossed. Hopefully that's not some foreshadowing, but it turned out pretty good. Now I get to run some wiring. I didn't get to do that today. I did get to wire in the 2 outlets and bring the wires into the breaker box, but I still need to get a 15 amp breaker for that, so the wires are just hanging out right now. The battery is pretty solid. I'm actually pretty happy with how little it moves and how sturdy it seems. It should hold up pretty well over some bumpy roads and maybe out in the desert, we'll see. Up next we get to do the DC wiring to the Class T fuse and to the inverter, and then the 48 volt and 12 volt wiring out of the converter. We get to do some of the AC wiring from the day inverter to the breaker box, which is going to be especially challenging with the 1/2 inch liquid tight fittings it has. We have to somehow get 6 gauge through the 1/2 inch liquid tight. It looks like it's going to fit, but it's going to be really tight, and we're going to have a hell of a time getting it through, so we'll see how that goes tomorrow. So stay tuned for the next video. Thank you.